The story of Laika, the dog sent into space by the Soviets in 1957, is recognized as a tragedy. She was the first living being to orbit the Earth, but her fate was sealed immediately after launch, as there was no plan to bring her back. Laika died due to overheating and stress, and her sacrifice became a symbol of space exploration. However, the alternative narrative reimagines Laika's fate, suggesting that her story didn't end with that fateful event. In this version, Laika is rescued by a secret alien civilization living on the moon. This idea challenges what we know about the original mission, creating an alternate plot where Laika not only survives, but also adapts to a new life in an extraterrestrial environment. This change in the dog's destiny transforms her role from a symbol of sacrifice to one of survival and resilience in extreme conditions. Laika's presence on the moon also serves as a catalyst for the discovery of hidden secrets by the astronauts of the Apollo 17 mission. The dog, who was supposed to have died in space, becomes a guide for the protagonists, leading them to an intelligent civilization residing on the moon's far side. This plot twist adds a supernatural and unsettling tone to the narrative. The fact that Laika is still alive, decades after her launch, and was welcomed by alien beings, prompts a reflection on humanity's capacity for abandonment and neglect. The story confronts the astronauts, and by extension, humanity, with the ethical and moral implications of their decisions. Laika, who was sent into space with no hope of return, finds refuge in a civilization that, though not human, shows empathy and respect for life. Moreover, Laika is depicted as a symbol of reconciliation between two worlds, the human and the extraterrestrial. She was abandoned by humans, but saved by lunar werewolves. The narrative explores themes such as responsibility, justice, and humanity's role in the universe. In this context, Laika becomes a point of intersection between human destructive ambition and alien compassion. Thus, the text redefines Laika's image, elevating her to something more than a mere failed experiment. She becomes a symbol of redemption and resilience, a living proof that life, even when neglected and abandoned, can find new meaning. Laika's survival defies expectations and becomes the narrative's turning point, revealing a much darker truth about space exploration. The Apollo 17 mission is historically known as the last time man set foot on the moon, in December 1972. On board were Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Schmitt, with Schmitt being the only scientist on the crew. Officially, the mission aimed to collect geological samples, conduct scientific experiments, and expand human knowledge of lunar geology. However, in the story, the mission's purpose goes beyond science. In the text, Schmitt reveals that while the world believed the mission's focus was strictly geological, there was something more at stake. NASA was already aware that the moon might harbor secrets beyond mere rocks. The mission concealed a darker objective: to investigate suspicions that an alien civilization might inhabit the lunar surface. Mission Control knew there was something unusual on the moon, and Schmitt was tasked with reporting any out-of-the-ordinary discoveries. The mission began typically with the launch of the Saturn V rocket and several days of travel through deep space. However, tensions among the crew increased as communication with Earth began to experience interference. This technical anomaly was the first sign that something was amiss, setting the stage for the mystery that would unfold during their stay on the lunar surface. The astronauts, trained to face physical and psychological adversities, soon began to realize that the mission was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Upon reaching lunar orbit, they started observing inexplicable phenomena, such as shadows that seemed to move intelligently, and interference that went beyond simple equipment failures. These details began to erode their confidence in the mission. Schmitt and Cernan, who descended to the lunar surface in the Challenger module, were confronted with a series of events not covered in NASA's protocols. The scientific mission quickly transformed into something far riskier and more disturbing. When they finally realized that there was an intelligent presence on the moon, the true nature of the Apollo 17 mission began to reveal itself. The quest for geological samples became secondary to the discovery of an alien civilization that had been observing humanity for a long time. The escalating tension culminates when the astronauts encounter Laika, and later, the lunar werewolves. This encounter completely alters the mission's purpose. What was meant to be a final geological exploration turns into a first contact mission, with implications far beyond what NASA had anticipated. The secret now is not just about the moon, but also about humanity's future in the cosmos. Shortly after the space voyage began, the crew noticed that something was wrong with communications. In the story, Schmidt mentions that Ronald Evans was the first to notice interference in the communication signals between the command module and Earth. This phenomenon was initially ignored by the astronauts, who attributed it to common technical glitches in space missions, but it quickly intensified. These interferences were described as a constant static that shouldn't have occurred. In the vast emptiness of space where radio signals travel unobstructed, these inexplicable distortions were the first indication that something unusual was disrupting the mission. However, the astronauts, highly trained to handle adverse situations, initially remained calm and continued with their normal procedures. As they approached lunar orbit, the interference intensified, making communication with Houston increasingly difficult. Mission Control on Earth, unaware of the severity of the situation, continued sending routine orders and checks. For the crew, the sense of isolation grew, as even with the equipment in perfect condition, it seemed as though an external force was blocking the transmissions. This static wasn't simply a technical failure. Throughout the narrative, it becomes clear that something was deliberately interfering with communication between the astronauts and Earth. Schmidt and Cernan began to suspect that this interference wasn't natural, but caused by an intelligent presence that wanted to prevent the crew from reporting what was happening. The pattern of interruptions suggested they were being monitored, and the shadows appearing on the lunar surface confirmed this suspicion. When the astronauts finally encountered Laika and the lunar werewolves, it became clear that this advanced civilization was responsible for the interference. They possessed technology far superior to that of humans, capable of manipulating communication waves and blocking radio signals. This revelation exposed the technological fragility of humans compared to this alien civilization, placing the astronauts in a position of total vulnerability. These mysterious interferences were much more than a simple technical obstacle. They acted as a silent warning that the astronauts were not alone, and that forces beyond human comprehension were in control of the events happening on the moon. The static symbolized the invisible barrier between Earth and what humans were not yet ready to understand. The fact that they were not alone in the universe. The shadows moving across the lunar surface were the first tangible sign that something was seriously wrong with the Apollo 17 mission. When Schmidt spotted a shadow moving anomalously, his first reaction was to try to rationalize what he saw, thinking his eyes were playing tricks or that the sunlight was creating an illusion. However, these shadows soon exhibited behavior that defied any logical or scientific explanation. These shadows, which initially appeared to be random shapes, began moving in a coordinated manner, as if controlled by an invisible intelligence. They did not follow the normal pattern of inanimate objects illuminated by sunlight. Instead, they seemed to have a clear purpose, which generated a growing sense of discomfort among the astronauts. Schmidt reported what he saw to Cernan, and both began to realize they were being observed by something or someone hidden in the shadows. The lunar environment, already desolate and inhospitable, became even more oppressive as these shadows seemed to follow their every move. The moon, which should have been a dead and inanimate place, now seemed alive, watching them at every step. The behavior of these shadows suggested they were not mere projections of inert objects, but entities that moved with intent. They appeared and disappeared subtly, as if testing the limits of the astronauts' perception. Doubt and fear began to creep into their minds, as the idea of being watched by something invisible and incomprehensible was profoundly terrifying. These shadows were, in fact, a manifestation of the presence of the lunar werewolves. They moved stealthily, hiding from the astronauts' direct view, testing their reactions before fully revealing themselves. The shadows served as a silent warning, a way to communicate to the humans that they were not the first intelligent beings to set foot on the moon. As the story progressed, these shadows became increasingly threatening, leading the astronauts on a journey of discovery and terror. What began as a mere visual anomaly soon transformed into a revelation that the moon held secrets far deeper than any human could imagine. The shadows marked the beginning of a descent into the unknown, where science and reason could no longer provide answers. The discovery of Laika, still alive on the lunar surface, was one of the most impactful moments of the narrative. When Schmidt saw the dog walking calmly in the moon's reduced gravity, his mind immediately tried to deny what his eyes were seeing. Laika, the dog sent into space by the Soviets and believed to have died in orbit, was now there, walking as if she belonged in her new environment. Laika's presence was utterly inexplicable. She should have been dead for over a decade, and the idea that a dog could survive in space for so long was completely impossible, according to conventional science. Yet, there she was, alive and moving, with an eerie serenity. Her appearance marked the point at which the narrative abandoned rationality and plunged into the supernatural, creating a mystery that would only deepen. Laika, who had become an icon of space exploration, now represented something much larger. The way she moved across the lunar surface, without showing any discomfort or difficulty, suggested that Laika had been transformed somehow. The astronauts, initially incredulous, began to follow the animal in search of answers, and Laika became their guide, leading them directly to the mystery awaiting on the moon. In the narrative, Laika also served as a symbol of human neglect. Humanity, in its quest for space domination, abandoned living beings without thinking about the consequences. However, Laika found a new life under the care of the lunar werewolves, creatures who, despite being alien, showed a form of compassion that humans had been unable to offer. Her presence was the thread that connected the astronauts to the alien civilization. By following Laika, they were led directly into the unknown, into the territory of the lunar werewolves. She was the intermediary between two worlds, human and extraterrestrial, and her repurposed existence represented the power of alien empathy in contrast to human cruelty. Laika was, at once, a grim reminder of humanity's failures and a hope that, even in the most brutal acts, something good could emerge. The narrative forced the astronauts to confront the moral consequences of their actions, and Laika was living proof that the cosmos was not a place where everything ended in emptiness. Instead, there were secrets, life, and compassion waiting in the unknown. The discovery of an alien civilization on the moon was the turning point in the narrative. When Schmidt and Cernan followed Laika beyond the point where they should have been collecting samples, they encountered something they never expected to find: an alien structure hidden on the moon's far side. This revelation defied everything they knew about space exploration and the very history of humanity. The first signs of the alien presence came with the shadows and the communication interferences. However, upon reaching the structure, the astronauts realized they were standing before something much greater than a simple natural phenomenon. The constructions were geometric, clearly planned, and suggested a level of technology and intelligence far beyond what humanity could conceive. The narrative describes this civilization as having inhabited the moon for millennia, silently observing the Earth. They never directly interfered with human evolution, but they were always there, in the shadows, monitoring human advancements and setbacks. This silent presence created an atmosphere of constant surveillance, as if humanity were a species under scrutiny. The lunar werewolves are described as highly evolved beings who chose to remain hidden to avoid any conflict with humanity. They have the technology and knowledge to destroy or subjugate Earth, but they prefer to live in peace, as long as humans do not pose a threat to them. Their choice to hide revealed an ancient wisdom that valued peaceful coexistence above all else. This civilization, although technologically superior, also demonstrated an ethic that the astronauts didn't expect to find. They were not invaders or conquerors. Rather, they simply observed and acted when necessary, as in the case of Laika. Their existence challenged human perceptions of what it meant to be advanced, both technologically and morally. The hidden civilization on the moon became a mirror for humanity. It forced us to confront our own limitations and question our arrogance in exploring the cosmos. The encounter with this civilization was a revelation that Earth was not the center of the universe, and that humanity, despite its advanced technology, still had much to learn about compassion, respect, and coexistence with other forms of life. The alien civilization on the moon was composed of beings that resembled wolves, but possessed intelligence far superior to humans. These beings, described as lunar werewolves, were introduced subtly, first as shadows stalking the astronauts from a distance. However, when they finally revealed themselves, they proved to be much more than mere creatures. Physically, the werewolves were tall, slender, and covered in silver fur that reflected the moonlight. Their appearances were wolf-like, but their behaviors and postures were more human. They walked upright, observing every movement of the astronauts with glowing eyes that demonstrated keen intelligence. The initial tension of seeing them quickly turned to fascination as it became clear that these beings were not naturally aggressive. The werewolves' communication was one of the first hints that they possessed highly advanced technology. They did not speak as humans do. Instead, they communicated telepathically with the astronauts. Their voices echoed in Schmidt and Cernan's minds without the need for words or sound. This form of communication created a sense of power, as it showed that they had been in control of the situation the entire time. These werewolves explained that they had been observing humanity for millennia, never interfering directly, but always present. They revealed that their civilization was much older than humanity, and that their decision to remain in the shadows was made to avoid unnecessary conflict. They feared the destructive nature of humans, who were driven by conquest and domination. The werewolves represented a form of life that combined advanced intelligence with a strong sense of ethics. Unlike many stereotypes about alien invaders, these beings preferred peace and isolation. They only interfered in the course of human history once, when they rescued Laika, the dog abandoned by the Soviets. This act of compassion highlighted the difference between them and humans, who often sacrificed living beings in the name of progress. The presence of the lunar werewolves in the text served as a direct contrast to humans. They represented a form of life that had achieved a balance between power and responsibility, while humanity still struggled to control its destructive impulses. The encounter between the astronauts and the werewolves became a reflection on what it truly meant to be advanced, not just in terms of technology, but also in terms of morality and wisdom. After the revelation of the lunar werewolf civilization, the astronauts received a clear and disturbing warning. The werewolves, despite their peaceful nature, had deep concerns about humanity's destructive potential. They had observed humans for millennia and knew that when faced with something unknown or powerful, humans tended to react with fear, aggression, and a desire for control. The werewolves' warning was straightforward. If humans discovered the existence of this civilization, an interplanetary war could begin. They feared that Earth's leaders, upon learning of such advanced technology, would try to exploit, control, or destroy them to ensure their own superiority. The werewolves had enough power and knowledge to defend themselves, but they preferred to avoid any conflict. The reference to Laika, the dog abandoned by humans in space, was a powerful reminder of how humanity dealt with the unknown. To the werewolves, Laika's treatment was an example of human cruelty, proof that humans had no qualms about sacrificing life for their goals. By saving Laika, the werewolves demonstrated compassion, something they believed humanity lacked on a large scale. The warning also involved a deeper analysis of human behavior. The werewolves saw humanity as a young and immature species, despite its technological advancements. They viewed humans as curious but dangerously impulsive, and believed that discovering such an advanced alien civilization could trigger a reaction of panic and violence. The astronauts, in turn, began to realize that this assessment wasn't far from the truth. This warning placed the astronauts in a morally complex position. They knew that upon returning to Earth, they would be carrying a secret that could change the course of human history. If they revealed what they had seen, they could start a conflict that would lead to destruction. If they kept the truth hidden, they would be denying humanity the chance to learn from a civilization far more advanced. The werewolves made it clear that although they did not desire conflict, they were ready to defend themselves. Humanity had a choice to make: continue seeking dominance over the cosmos, or learn to coexist peacefully with other forms of life. This warning became the central dilemma of the narrative, placing the astronauts at an ethical crossroads regarding what to do with the knowledge they had gained. In the story, Laika was not just a dog sent into space by the Soviets. She became a powerful symbol, of how humanity treated those it considered expendable in its quest for progress. In reality, Laika was a victim of humanity's desire to conquer space, and her death in orbit was widely acknowledged as a tragedy. In the story, however, Laika survives, rescued by an alien civilization. Laika's presence on the moon, alive and adapted to the alien environment, symbolized the capacity for redemption and survival. While humans had abandoned her, the lunar werewolves took her in and cared for her. This gesture represented the fundamental difference between the alien civilization and humanity. While humans sacrificed Laika for their goals, the werewolves showed compassion and empathy. Laika became a link between the astronauts and the lunar werewolves. Her survival defied logic and science, but it also forced the humans to confront their own actions. She was a constant reminder that humanity's quest for power and conquest often overlooked the lives that were sacrificed along the way. The werewolves saw in Laika an example of what humans were capable of doing, both in terms of cruelty and kindness. The dog, who was abandoned and forgotten by humanity, found a new home among the werewolves. She became a symbol of compassion and resilience, showing that even in the most brutal acts of humans, there was the possibility of redemption. The lunar werewolves chose to save her, and that choice spoke volumes about their morality compared to that of humanity. For the astronauts, Laika was a painful reminder that space exploration was not free from ethical dilemmas. They were confronted with the reality that the quest for space conquest could have terrible consequences for those sacrificed in the process. Laika was a living symbol of those consequences, and her survival was a critique of how humans treated life in their pursuit of power. Ultimately, Laika was more than just a surviving animal. She was a reflection of humanity itself, a species that, in its search for knowledge and power, often neglected the lives it endangered. Laika's survival offered a chance for reflection and a warning that human progress should be tempered with compassion and responsibility. The encounter between the astronauts and the lunar werewolves raised the question of a possible conflict between Earth and this advanced civilization. The werewolves' warning was clear. Humanity, with its destructive tendencies, might very well try to exploit or destroy the lunar civilization, triggering an interplanetary war. This scenario placed the astronauts in a delicate position, forcing them to consider the consequences of their actions. Throughout its history, humanity has a long tradition of exploring and conquering the unknown. Every new territory discovered by humans has, in one way or another, been dominated or exploited in the name of progress and civilization. However, the presence of an advanced alien civilization on the moon could be seen as either a threat or an opportunity by Earth's leaders. The werewolves feared that if their existence were revealed, humanity would not hesitate to try to control them. The potential conflict between Earth and the moon would not just be a matter of technology, but also of ethics. The narrative raised questions about what it meant to be advanced, not only in terms of science, but also in terms of morality. The werewolves, despite their ability to destroy, chose peace and isolation. They did not want conflict, but knew that humanity might force that situation. For the astronauts, the decision to reveal or hide what they found on the moon had enormous implications. If they chose to tell the truth, they could trigger an arms race to control or destroy the alien civilization. If they chose to hide it, they would be protecting Earth from potential conflict, but also depriving humanity of incredible knowledge. This choice was the central dilemma of the narrative. The potential for conflict also symbolized humanity's internal struggle between curiosity and the desire for power. Space exploration was seen as humanity's next great step, but the discovery of another intelligent life form raised questions about how humans would handle this new reality. Would we be able to coexist peacefully with another civilization, or would we try to dominate it? Ultimately, the text suggested that conflict was not inevitable, but that it depended on the choices humans made. If humanity could overcome its desire for conquest and learn to respect other forms of life, there might be hope for peaceful coexistence. However, the werewolves' warning was clear. If humanity tried to dominate them, they were prepared to defend themselves, and that could lead to a war Earth could not win. The astronauts' decision to keep secret what they found on the moon was a choice laden with moral and psychological weight. Schmidt and Cernan, upon realizing the magnitude of the discovery, knew that revealing the existence of the lunar werewolves could change the course of human history. However, they also knew that humanity, with its propensity for exploration and conquest, was not ready for that revelation. Throughout the narrative, the astronauts were presented with an ethical dilemma: to tell the truth about what they saw, or to protect humanity from itself. They knew that if they disclosed the existence of the lunar werewolves, Earth would react with fear and aggression. The discovery of such an advanced civilization would provoke a race to explore and control the moon, potentially sparking a conflict that could be devastating for both species. The decision to keep the secret also reflected the emotional burden the astronauts carried. They had gone from scientific explorers to guardians of forbidden knowledge. They knew that upon returning to Earth, they would be hailed as heroes, but they would carry the weight of a truth they could never share with anyone. This psychological burden was the true conflict of the narrative. Schmidt and Cernan understood that keeping the secret meant denying humanity access to technology and wisdom that could transform the world. However, they also realized that humanity was not yet ready to handle that knowledge responsibly. The story showed that when confronted with the unknown, humans tended to react with violence and exploitation, and the astronauts did not want to be responsible for triggering an interplanetary conflict. The decision not to reveal what they found was also a choice of protection. By keeping the secret, the astronauts were protecting Earth from a potential enemy, but they were also protecting the lunar werewolves from humanity. They knew that if Earth's leaders discovered the existence of such an advanced civilization, they wouldn't hesitate to try to control or destroy it. Keeping the secret was, therefore, an act of responsibility and sacrifice. Ultimately, the astronauts' choice reflected the tension between the desire for knowledge and the duty to protect. They understood that humanity's future could depend on its ability to coexist peacefully with other life forms, but they also knew that this coexistence was still far beyond the reach of the human species. Keeping the secret was the only way to ensure that, for now, Earth would remain safe. Throughout the narrative, the astronauts were consumed by increasing moral and psychological tension. From the beginning, Schmidt and Cernan felt that something was wrong with the mission. The communication interferences, the shadows moving on the lunar surface, and Laika's appearance. All these events contributed to the growing sense that they were dealing with forces beyond their control. The moral tension intensified when they discovered the alien civilization and heard the werewolves' warning. The astronauts were confronted with the reality that humanity, despite its technological advances, was not yet prepared to deal with another form of intelligent life. They realized they had a greater responsibility than just bringing geological samples back to Earth. Now, they were the guardians of a secret that could change the fate of humanity. The psychological tension also began to manifest as the astronauts realized the weight of their discovery. They knew that upon returning to Earth, they would have to face the burden of keeping this secret. The idea that they could never tell the truth about what they saw created a sense of isolation and despair. They became prisoners of their own knowledge, unable to share their experiences with anyone. Schmidt and Cernan began to question their own sanity. The shadows, the lunar werewolves, Laika's survival, everything defied logic and reason. They wondered if they were really seeing what they thought they were seeing, or if their minds were playing tricks on them due to the stress of the mission. This constant doubt eroded their confidence in their own perceptions, further increasing the psychological tension. Their return to Earth did not relieve this tension. Though they were welcomed as heroes, the astronauts knew they were hiding a monumental secret. The pressure to keep what they discovered hidden weighed on them daily, and the fear that someone might eventually uncover the truth haunted them. They knew that at any moment, a slip-up could trigger the chain of events that would lead to the conflict they so feared. Ultimately, the moral and psychological tension was the true driving force of the narrative. The discovery of the lunar werewolves and the decision to keep the secret placed the astronauts in an untenable position, forcing them to live with the knowledge that they were holding humanity's fate in their hands. The tension between what they knew and what they could reveal was the central conflict of the story, and this tension never fully dissipated.